Welcome back. Please forgive the husky voice, just coming back from a cold here. This video is about the poem Exposure by Wilfred Owen. You'll find this poem on a few GCSE anthologies, but the poem is interesting in its own right. I'm going to analyse it and show you what you should learn about the poem using these headings. This will allow you to compare different aspects of poetry so it makes sense to explore them in a memorable way. You can also use these ideas for an essay plan, and if you do cover them, you should have everything that you need to get a top grade. This is a longer poem, but it's a useful one if you have a strategy for learning it, so this is going to help. If you want to create a mind map for this poem, you could use a template like this. Pause if you want to copy it and fill it in as you go. I will always use the same headings, so if you want, you can build up a bank of these mind maps for all the poems. Okay, first up is content and meaning. This section is here to help you secure the poem in your memory. You need to know what happens, what it's about, and what it means. This is a first-person lyric poem, meaning it expresses the poet's feelings about the situation he's placed in during the First World War. There's an authenticity in the experience. Owen was really there. He experienced the conditions he described in 1917 when he and his men were left in an open field, hiding in the craters created by shells, wet and freezing, with no support and no chance of rescue for 4 days and nights. Owen spent another few days hiding in what he called the hole, with the body of a friend just meters away, in freezing conditions, and some of the imagery in the final stanza is probably derived from that experience. So Owen describes the war as a battle against the weather and conditions, as well as what we might traditionally consider the enemy, those soldiers from Germany hiding in similar trenches, going through similar situations. Lost in the depth of suffering, Owen dreams of home, perhaps in a fugue state, a kind of delirium common to those suffering from hypothermia. This is a complex poem and it deserves more time than I can give it in this video. I will therefore give you a way in and include more than you need for a GCSE exam, but you will also be able to explore it on your own and get even more from it. If you find the poem too much, hold on, I'm going to break it down and give you exactly what you need. It's always useful to consider the beginning and ending of a poem, as it reveals so much about the attitudes and feelings of the poet. This poem starts in medias res, in the middle of things, and this is because Owen wants to create the sense of war being confusing and lacking real clarity. The quotation, "Our brains ache," is an abrupt opening and poses questions to the reader. Who is the collective our? Where are they? How can a brain possibly ache? And the strangeness of the image is puzzling and troubling. The present tense tells us that it's happening as he writes, and for Owen's audience, this may have been a shock. The reality of the suffering of the soldiers was not well known. The present tense continues with the iced east winds that knive us. There's clear sibilance in the line, reflecting the winds themselves. But the striking thing for me is the ellipsis and the challenge of explaining why and how Owen uses it, as he does throughout the first stanza. Ellipsis is often used as a kind of thought pause to reflect on the point being made, or sometimes it's used for omission. What Owen is doing here, though, is painting a series of parallel images in the first stanza, all ending with an ellipsis, all trailing off into silence. The technical word for this is aposiopesis, which is a really interesting word, and it means that you leave a thought unfinished. And in this case, it's the action that is unfinished. The kniving, the weariness, the confusion, all of those actions carry on, but it carries on in silence and with no one to hear. A clear reference to the generals and public that the suffering goes on. If you want to learn aposiopesis, do put it on a flashcard along with any other technique or quotation that I use in this video. If you've not used flashcards before, I'll leave a link in the description to my video on making and using flashcards. You genuinely don't need the word aposiopesis to pass GCSE English Lit, but if you're a fan of the more advanced or complex techniques like aposiopesis, check out Lawrence Stern's A Sentimental Journey, but the best example in English literature that I'm aware of anyway. If you want an alternative or perhaps a simpler way of explaining the ellipsis, think how it leaves something unsaid. Owen could tell you more, but he knows no one is really listening to them personally at that moment. Perhaps that's all he can say, tired and frozen as he is. The ending of the poem is similarly powerful, but I'm going to concentrate on the very final sentence. All their eyes are ice, but nothing happens. If the opening asks questions of the reader, so does the ending. Where are they? Are they the burying party? Are they the dead? Are they both? Is Owen commenting that the burying party need to be numb to their task, their presumably repeated task, and so their eyes are ice, impenetrable to what they bear witness? Or can we understand it literally? The eyes of the dead are frozen, and they were for Owen in the hole he survived in. If I had to, I'd come down on the side of both, and I'm taking direction from the word all. It collects all that are present. But it's generally a good idea, and particularly in this poem, to look at the variety of different meanings that are available and peel off the different layers. You will get a higher mark by doing that. The ending presents the reader with this horrific image then, which is deliberately ambiguous, but is then juxtaposed with the final statement, but nothing happens. This is laden with the apathy of the leaders doing nothing in the face of great personal suffering. This phrase has already been seen closing the first stanza, repeated in the third and fourth stanzas, so it offers us a cyclical loop, a never-ending cycle of suffering that the men cannot escape, except only through deaths and dreams. The use of repetition creates a sense of refrain. In this case, it emphasizes what Owen sees as the futility of war, wasting lives while nothing actually changes. As always, when we're talking about form and structure, we're talking about the elements of the poem other than the word choice, and we're trying to use those elements to explore and analyse. We've already talked about some elements of structure by looking at the beginning and ending, and form by commenting that the poem is a lyric poem, a poem from a personal perspective. The rhythm of the poem is interesting. If you go counting up syllables, you'll find that the poem is mostly hexameter, meaning it has 6 feet or pairs of syllables in each line, but you will also find many lines that are longer and many lines that are shorter. An observation of what is happening in the poem on its own is a starting point, so let's expand it with an interpretation. That's how we're going to secure more marks, and that gives us something of value. Let's say then that Owen extends some lines because it creates in the reader a sense of not knowing what to expect. The meter is used to create a sense of unease rather than predictability, just as he experiences in the trenches. The rhyme is altogether more complex. The simplest way of interpreting it is to say that he uses half rhyme throughout the poem, and that is because he wants to create a sense that his world doesn't fit together while it is discordant. Even though it looks like rhyme, it doesn't quite work. That is quite deliberate. Rhyme works like this. The final consonant in a line is the same as is the preceding vowel sound. So you have 2 sounds that match, a vowel sound and a consonant sound. If you think about the words wire and war, they have the same consonant sound at the end, the R sound, and just before it you have different vowel sounds. This makes it a half rhyme. If you want to get really technical, Owen uses a special kind of half rhyme called para rhyme. This is where the words follow an identical pattern for consonant sound, but vary only the vowel. The example just used of wire and war have the same consonant sounds for the whole words, W and R, but the vowel sound in between is different. Silent and salient are the same as are naivous and nervous. Not all the half rhymes are para rhymes though. Grey and grow have different final consonants, for instance, so the overall effect is still one of unsettling the mood and expectation in the reader to reflect the uncanny and eerie feeling of the soldiers. There is one full rhyme with glozed and closed in the 6th stanza, and that is used to wrap up the idea of home and the near-death dream, that other world of warmth and happiness. That part of the world seems to fit together, makes sense, where his world actually holds up, and now we've noticed the full rhyme, we can say that Owen uses full rhyme emphatically, drawing the reader's attention to it. In this section, I pick out striking images to concentrate on, and they all encapsulate Owen's ideas about the effects of the conflict on the men that experience it. We've already talked about the striking image of the opening of the poem, so let's examine something a little broader. There's a directness to the men. Owen describes how their senses are open. At the beginning of the second stanza, he says, "Watching, we hear." The alliteration of W in watching, we, draws our attention to it, and we can interpret it in a few different ways, including linking it to the title Exposure. Owen can see and hear the suffering of the war, of the metaphorical exposure of the men left vulnerable by a political class that really don't care about the individuals. Many will not survive. The exposure is literal and the suffering is real. The present tense amplifies the urgency, but for us now as readers, we see it becomes poignant as we understand many of these men have effectively been left to die. These three words are important because of the opposite. They watch, but no one can see them. People don't understand the suffering, and they don't hear the cries. This does open up a very interesting comparison with William Blake's London, who similarly asks for those in control to listen, to hear and see the suffering, and ultimately do something about it. Check out my video on London if you want more details. Another interesting image is when Owen mentions the dawn. He uses what might be considered a cliché symbol, but he subverts it. He uses an idea that we all understand, and he twists it so that it's something new and different. Instead of the symbol of hope that we might expect, instead we're presented with the poignant misery of dawn begins to grow. We only know war lasts, rain soaks, and clouds sag stormy. The unexpected and ironic use of pathetic fallacy, loading human emotions onto dawn, emphasizes that the new day can only shine light on despair. The ellipsis tells us that it keeps happening, time keeps passing, and of course, nothing happens. The men themselves don't own the misery, they only know that tricolon of facts. War lasts, rain soaks, and clouds sag stormy, which are all devoid of emotion. Dawn is then personified so that the weather can seem more deadly than the enemy. Dawn, massing in the east, her melancholy army attacks once more in ranks on shivering ranks of grey. The description of the weather is interesting. The morning becomes a hostile enemy that will bring more suffering. Dawn is the general in charge of the army, but again the expectation is subverted. This is not a pep-talked, motivated army under a general. This is a melancholy army. Notice that Dawn is female. Perhaps we would expect a feminized figure of nature to be caring, to be motherly and maternal, but this expectation is confounded by the juxtaposition of the army. Let's explain the adjective melancholy and explore the connotations. It's a sadness. It suggests a deep thinking attitude that arrives at the emotion of sadness by great effort, great thought. It's here to stay and it won't be shifted. There's a lugubrious quality. It's slow and dismal and entirely without hope. This is, of course, symbolically reflected back on the men. Ranks and ranks shows that this is never ending, or appears so to the men. The idea behind this final section is to give you easily identifiable points that you can use to explore the presentation of feelings and use those as a starting point to compare feelings in other poems. This is an easy way in. The thing about this poem is that there's so much you can explore on it, and it's easy for that to seem overwhelming. For that reason, I want to give you one thing that sums up the futility of trench warfare that Owen endured, something that is easily remembered but loaded with good analysis. The ending of each stanza is quite revealing when you consider how Owen uses the endings. We've already said the repetition of "but nothing happens" creates a cyclical loop, a never-ending cycle of suffering. But the final line of each stanza varies from that. Those final lines in each stanza are refrains, repetitions, almost like a chorus comment, and the sequence of them tells a story. We see Owen questioning his purpose with, "What are we doing here?" answering that refrain with another question 3 stanzas later when he asks, "Is it that we're dying?" At this point, answers for his purpose seem scant. You can't find them, but death seems to become certain. In the next stanza, which ends, "We turn back to our dying." That presents the reader with an extreme image of the men accepting their death, which, don't forget, is from exposure, being left out, forgotten, unwanted, or no longer needed. But even that is surpassed in the penultimate stanza when he observes, "For love of God seems dying. War has led to despair, giving us hope. The suffering has convinced them that no higher force, no bigger purpose can possibly include them and their suffering." Remember, these men expect to die and they expect no salvation. This is the realization of futility. I do hope you found that useful. Remember, if you're going to learn this poem, get out your flashcards, get out your mind maps, keep working at it. I've got lots more videos coming up, so please do subscribe and I'll see you soon.